What is up, everybody? You are checking out the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast, and I am your host, Ant, and I am joined today by my new friend and our new co-host for the Attitude Years series. Introduce yourself, my friend.
My name is Tyler Peters, and I'm so excited to be joining you, Ant, on the podcast. And I also co-host the Rewind Wrestling Radio podcast as well. And I'm a writer for WrestleBuddy.com. And I'm just so happy and honored to be on the program today.
Yeah, you're definitely going to have to check out both of those for Wrestling Buddy. He writes a lot of great columns. There's a lot of cool stuff on there. We'll talk later on in the show about both of those, Tyler, but we'll dive right into what everyone came here to listen to. You are checking out our Attitude Years series recap, and we are on episode 21 today with our WWF Raw Is War, coming to you live from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on April 13th, 1998. And just last week, a lot of craziness happened on Raw. We saw Stone Cold Steve Austin come out almost pretending to be a corporate champion, to be the champion that Vince McMahon wanted him to always be. He came out in a suit and tie, and he basically said to Vince McMahon, I'm never going to be like this. He takes a picture with Vince after hitting him with a low blow and just adding another thorn to Vince's side, as usual, is our champion. And speaking of our champion, the WWF champion, Stone Cold Steve Austin, starts out Raw Is War, and he comes out and he challenges Vince McMahon to come out to the ring. He says, get your ass out here right now before I won't knock your teeth out if you come down here. So Vince comes down with Briscoe and Patterson and SWAT members. And basically, Stone Cold is questioning Vince who he will be fighting at Unforgiven in your house. Vince says, I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm not too sure. You'll just have to wait. And Stone Cold pretty much says, well, how about tonight you and I have a match? And Vince is like, obviously he's afraid of Stone Cold, we all know, but he just doesn't say nothing. And he says, well, we can do things the easy way, Vince, or we can do things the hard way. And Vince asks Stone Cold, well, what does that mean? And Stone Cold says, well, the easy way is I could probably kick your ass with one arm tied behind my back, and it would probably be me beating you up. The hard way would be me hunting you backstage and beating you up in your office. And he then proceeds to tell Vince, you have 30 minutes to make up your mind if you will fight me or not tonight. And, he goes, and just so that you try not to run, your limo driver's been beat up and your limo has 2 flat tires. So there's no way you can leave. You're going to have to make a decision. So it looks as if Vince McMahon has nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. He started with Austin, and Austin looks to finish it. What did you think, Tyler, of this promo at the time? And what do you think of, Vince hiding behind all those guys?
I think it just reinstates how legendary, how iconic could be a word to describe this whole feud and rivalry between the Mr. McMahon character that Vince was portraying. It had a lot of the credibility of both he and Austin. This was just the volume turned up, as they say, the extension of how they could really portray themselves in reality, in real life, is what we're alluding to. And to me, this is what made the Attitude Era so great. It was one of the defining moments, having McMahon and Austin have a match. I mean, people were very surprised in a great way, because they're like, hey, Vince McMahon's going to step in the ring and take on the WWF champion, actually have a title opportunity, and everybody's trying to talk him out of it with his stooges. That is Jerry Briscoe, Pat Patterson, even Sergeant Slaughter later on in the show, his own son, Shane McMahon. And I love Austin. Stone Cold Steve Austin reminds me of a lot of the people down south, the hardworking redneck, beer drinking, they'll flip you off. I mean, he resonated to everyone around the country and the world because he was that guy that opposed authority. He was that anti-hero that was so popular in films, and it was portrayed and relayed on this episode of Raw and throughout their TV, their pay-per-views, their house shows. And Vince McMahon represented that corporate owner because it was legitimate, because that's what he was. He was just not the announcer. It was revealed that he actually ran the company. I believe the company may have been private still. Stone Cold's the one that made it public. And by him calling out Vince, he's just had enough. And this is the way you start out a show. And you got a hot open, as they call it, with one of your best storylines. And that would be, if not greatest storylines, McMahon and Austin. And I just love how McMahon, we saw him kind of cower. He was taking his time. There was a process. None of them rushed things here. I love even the walk. It built more in the show. And I know you'll add more of the context here in just a little bit, but I thought overall this was so well done. And this made me miss and reminisce about the good old days of the late 90s Attitude Era, the Monday Night Wars, that whole period and timeline. So that's my impressions of it.
Yeah, I liked how they didn't waste time. Like everything mattered. They didn't make this like a 15-minute segment. It was, a pretty decent, maybe like 10-minute, maybe 5 even. And
I
they
believe
just,
so.
yeah, like they got to the point, and now Vince, you have 30 minutes. And again, like we talked about this a little bit before we started the podcast today, that we want you listeners to sort of put yourself in that time frame. You might hear Vince versus Austin now and think, oh, we've seen that before. You just saw that at WrestleMania this past year. But this is the first time, potentially, if Vince McMahon agrees, that these two can actually fight. And the first time you're seeing an authority figure could potentially get his ass kicked. I mean, we've all wanted to beat up our boss before. We've all, wanted to be ourselves and not care and have people like us for ourselves. And Austin was doing that. He was sort of a symbolism of what the change in wrestling needed to be. So yeah, so I was excited to see that. And they also left Vince with no choice. Like, they cut his tires. So there's really no escape for him. So it makes it believable that Vince has to come up with a decision. And Tyler, you were just talking about it. Pat Patterson and Briscoe are backstage, and they're trying to convince Vince McMahon to break up Stone Cold, beat him up. Don't, they're pushing him that he can do it, that he can fight Stone Cold. And Vince has started feeling himself a little bit. He's like, what, maybe I can. But then we get our first match of the night, and it's a special chain match. And we have the Disciples of Apocalypse taking on Los Boricuas. And last week we saw DX just annihilate DOA. We saw them hang up, I think it was chains in the ropes, but Legion of Doom 2000 was able to come out and make the save. Speaking of DX, they actually walk out to the ramp, and Chains ends up fighting Billy Gunn outside as DX nails Chains with steel chair shots, and then Billy Gunn hits a power driver Chains on the ramp. DX then continue to attack DOA as they are chained together, and then they have Los Boricuas do a suck it taunt, but then DX attack Los Boricuas afterwards. So that match is a no contest, and then we see Chains being stretchered out, and then China clothesline Savio Vega. So a lot to unpack. Let's talk a bit about these teams first. What did you think of Boricuas and DOA as tag teams?
I like these tag teams. I do remember Los Boricuas, Savio Vega and Jose Estrada versus the Disciples of Apocalypse, Skull and 8 Ball, the Harris twins. If you watch TNA, that's who the same people. And DX was just at an all-time level here. This was what got him in the Hall of Fame. And sure, people will argue about the antics, but remember, folks, it is the Attitude Era for a reason. Yep. And it was kind of funny in a way that we had a character named Chains, and this is a chain match. Yeah. So that right away was kind of comical, not making fun of the talent here. But to see Triple H hitting the pedigree on Chains, and then Billy Gunn doing the pound driver on him on the rampway was something I didn't expect to open up the show. Well, as far as the segment to follow the opening of the show, let me clarify. And the way they aligned with, Los Boricuas against the OA, and then China ambushing them with the low blows. I mean, that's the spontaneity of all these, the way they formatted the program. So I thought it was, for what it was good. We didn't really see much of a wrestling match. No. I mean, it was more, I think, just the special attraction here of DX coming in and DOA and Los Boricuas just getting a little bit of time here. And it was what it was, but I still enjoyed it. I mean, personally, for me, it was it was a good way to kind of break, continue that intensity. What we're seeing with Austin and McMahon, you got to do it maybe in different ways. And that's all they were doing to follow that. That's my takeaway.
For me, like I've always been like, I've tried to really get into DOA, but I've always been bored. I think I was surprised that this was the this was who DX targeted first right away, because I was like, at the time, like I felt like DOA, maybe they like, did you think DOA mattered? Like, were they a big duo for you? Because for me, like I didn't really think they were that important to have DX go after right away.
With respect to DOA, I have to concur that I didn't think they were a big enough target, but I was happy they were in this position. But to me, this was a very intriguing time as far as tag teams and the way they did the feuds, especially even with DX. But this was, to me, just a way to introduce DX back out, yet still follow the story, how they attacked DOA. And this was to get them on the show, and we'd see them feature throughout. So they were such a big draw that you had to have Triple H, Road Dogg, China X-Pac, and Billy Gunn come out. I mean, because the fans anticipated that. They wanted it, much like they did Stone Cold Steve Austin or a Bret Hart or an Undertaker Kane, as we'll see throughout the show. So yeah. I didn't mind it, but you made up a great observation there, or you brought up a great observation. Let me say that with DOA, I didn't think were prominent enough, but I do respect their talents.
Yeah. Yeah, it was it was interesting to see them in that, in that light, but like, man, I don't think, when you compare the two, you already know DX is going to beat up DOA. I mean, you could just tell. But anyways, we then go backstage, and this time Vince is with Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe, and his son, Shane McMahon. I know we've seen Shane as a referee before in the late 80s, early 90s, but I think this might be the first time he is officially introduced as the son of Vince McMahon on a wrestling TV show. And Shane doesn't want his father to fight Stone Cold. He's telling him, don't do it. It's not worth it. And you start to really understand that, it looks like the Stooges don't have Vince's best interest. They want him to shut up Stone Cold Steve Austin, where Shane is like, shut him up, but maybe not this way, Dad. We then go to, we get Raw, brought to us by the U.S. Army, WWF, the Music Volume 2. I always like seeing these things because the promo, I miss the old school stuff,
I do too.
Go ahead.
No, I'm with you. I think there's the nostalgic factor with all these little promo packages from the way they did the music to introduce us to Raw. And like you're saying, with the Army and whatever the video games or what have you, just various examples, that it just brings back those fun recollections of the days of old. And it's hard to believe we're talking 1998 is the days of old, but folks, we're in 2022. So
I was going to say simpler times, like our grandparents.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're so right. But that's all I was going to insert. That I just think you brought up a great point that I miss, even like the segues in these programs.
Yeah, they just, and maybe it's just because like we grew up in, this time period, like more so you, but like just even like, you mentioned the video games, like seeing like how crappy the graphics are. It just like, it was just more simplistic. There wasn't a need to have perfection so much. And I think that's why I liked this era so much. We then have Vince McMahon. He finally comes down. It's been over 30 minutes at this point, and there's wrestlers in the ring, and he tells them to leave. And Vince says, for over 50 years, the World Wrestling Federation has been a part of my heritage. The WWF has always been about honor and integrity, qualities that are currently lacking in our WWF champion. Stone Cold Steve Austin has no honor and no integrity. And he goes, so the question is, will I fight Stone Cold Steve Austin in this ring tonight? And my answer is, oh, hell yeah. So, I mean, now you're thinking, all right, we're going to see some shit. Vince is going to get his ass kicked. Were you happy that did you think he was going to say yes? Did you know maybe he had a plan, or did you think he was going to be doomed?
They did a good job of having you guess whether he was going to accept the challenge, but just knowing the way they were going with the whole story, the direction overall with it concerning it. However, you just knew that Vince McMahon is a tough guy. He's a man for a reason. And he's going to accept the challenge, because then he looks weak if he doesn't, even though he's got Shane, to your point, talking him out of it. He's got his people that are advising him, like Briscoe, like Patterson, even Sergeant Slaughter, even JR, leads the broadcast to console him a little bit and kind of tell Vince, hey, this will split the company wide open, because he's legit the owner of the company, not just on television. So I thought it made sense to finally see a culmination. Maybe not the finale necessarily, but to keep building that story of, hey, in the anticipation, we're going to see something very big tonight. And that just, reiterated that fact that Vince said, yes, I will fight you, Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, and I think too, I think for people who are just seeing this, it wasn't normal for like the main event wrestler to fight the owner. So I'm sure some fans thought that this was probably gonna be like a one-off thing where like maybe Vince is gonna get beat up and that's gonna be it. As we learn and know through the history of WWE, that's not the case. But I can see fans thinking like, okay, he's gonna get his ass kicked and that's gonna be it. So I feel like right now this is a time when people are calling their friends and they're like, yo, guess what? Vince accepted the challenge. You're going to see Vince versus Austin tonight. So, yeah. Next.
Yeah, people were tuning in.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I'll have to like check out like what was going on with WCW at the time, but I feel like WWE was definitely popping. Next we have Pantera and Aguila taking on the team of Too Much, but before the match can start, the Undertaker comes down to the ring and he destroys Scott Taylor, Pantera, and Aguila. Brian Christopher is able to run out of the ring. And Undertaker is pissed because last week on Raw, Kane burned the site of his parents' gravestone. And I think he burned their bones as well. And Undertaker takes the mic and he says, Kane, it's time your big brother shows you what evil is all about. You are no longer the hunter, but the hunted. He goes, this fight will go for eternity until you show your face. It's time for you to come out of the darkness, Kane. Now, to me, this is probably one of the greatest storylines, Undertaker versus Kane. How were you feeling during the time? Did you think, like, what did you think of the storyline? And did you think Undertaker would come out on top of his brother at Unforgiven?
Well, let's tackle the storyline first. I thought this was one of the better storylines that WWF or WWE now has ever done with introducing the Undertaker's brother. I mean, here you got Kane, a guy that you could believe could be his brother. He was actually looked to be a little bit taller than Taker. And then you have Paul Bearer, who was so instrumental. I mean, this storyline would have not been what it was without Bearer's involvement. Knowing the connection, he was the original manager, at least after Brother Love with the Undertaker. You had Kane, going back to that Hell in a Cell match with Michaels and Undertaker when he debuted and ripped off the cage door. Just so much, and them talking about it beforehand. And I kind of learned this by listening to like Bruce Pritchard and Jim Cornette, guys who were involved in creative. It's not like I have that much in-depth detail, but it does help you understand the psychology and what they were wanting to accomplish between the Brothers of Destruction as we would know them with Kane and the Undertaker. So that was always very fascinating. And I'm such a mark for Paul Bearer. I mean, I always love a good old yes. And this Paul Bearer was equally as terrific because the way he was able to convey that message about he's actually, later on we know he's the father of Kane, but this was not told yet. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but the storyline was great. Did I think we'd ever see it? Yes, eventually, but they did a great job of being patient with it, having the Undertaker just destroy people that were at no fault at all. But he was just having to be evil. He knew eventually, hey, I'm going to have to face my brother. They had to make it personal, and that's what happened.
Yeah. Okay, so this was such an exciting time, but we had to take a break for a moment. We come back with our Starburst Slam of the week. And it's Stone Cold Steve Austin stunning Vince McMahon 2 weeks to go on Raw. They've been setting up the stages for this match for weeks now. We then get Jim Ross and Shane McMahon backstage. They're arguing with Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe, and Vince. And Vince tells Shane, go get my gym bag. I'm fighting tonight. So, again, they're all trying to stop Vince. Vince is being the big dude on campus. He's willing to fight. We'll see. All right. We have our WWF Light Heavyweight Champion, Taka Michinoku, taking on Double J Jeff Jarrett with Tennessee Lee. And here are a couple of quick highlights. We get flyers for Jeff Jarrett's concert for Unforgiven, and they drop from the ceiling. And Steve Blackman is seen, and he says that revenge is sweet, and he's coming for Jeff Jarrett. The match starts, and Taka gets the control in the beginning with a cross body. Jarrett nails a superplex and then a drop kick, and then Taka nails a spinning heel kick, a clothesline to the outside. However, Tennessee Lee distracts Taka Michinoku as Club Kamikaze, aka Kai and Tai, come out, and they attack Taka Michinoku from behind. And Jeff Jarrett applies the figure four on Taka Michinoku. However, Taka gets a DQ victory. What was your thoughts on Jeff Jarrett and Tennessee Lee and Taka and the match?
I thought the match was good for what they were presenting. I mean, I'm a big fan of both Taka and Jarrett. And Tennessee Lee, don't forget, is one of the Foolers. So he's a legend in the business. Now, the characters seem a little cartoonish, but for what he had as far as creative, I thought he did well. Double J, Jeff Jarrett, so underappreciated as a worker in the ring. I mean, no matter of the silly kind of Music City gimmicks, he made them work for what it was, this era of even during the Attitude Era, which to me, let me ask you this. Did you think it fit, though, the Attitude Era? Want this a little bit more like predating it to me?
Yeah, so I
think, yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to add that that's something that caught my attention that when you reviewed it, and I was going back, just watched it last night, and I was trying to place myself at, if I was Jarrett, I'm thinking, this, the way they've got him booked here, this would fit more before.
Yeah.
They came into this where they were letting things loose a little bit, pushing the envelope and making everything grittier. That character kind of fell out of sorts to me. But that's just my perspective.
Well, I always felt, I think I might have said this, I don't know if I said this last week or before, like I always thought it would have been cool if Jeff Jarrett came back where he had this character of where like he thought he was the greatest country singer and like he like would like go like he was crazy. Like if they made his character be like I mean, they kind of did do that because he really, I don't know. It's hard to put him in this because this is like a silly gimmick, right? It's like a country singer fighting. But like maybe if they had him be like, I don't know. It is a weird, I don't even know what to say about him. Like, because it's a weird placing. I mean, I think putting him with Tennessee Lee was another problem because it didn't really let his character grow because all you think of in WWE of Jeff Jarrett at that time was country singer. Later on in 98, you'll see him transform. And 98 is a very transformative year for Jarrett. He starts out with NWA, then he goes to Tennessee Lee, then he goes to Southern Justice, then he goes to Deborah. Like, it's a fucking year.
There was so many directions, and I think not knowing what to do with him until, like you said, he finally started 98, 99. That's when we saw one of his best runs was actually came later, even though he'd always been this good wrestler.
Yeah.
He really started getting pushed by the company, at least in the upper mid card. So that's what
maybe they could have like to make it more agile. Maybe they could have had like where they had like a section where it was like Jarrett fans who were like supposedly all fans of his music and they would like interfere, like groupies, kind of like do something silly, but like because it's a silly gimmick to begin with. Really, a country music singer is really going to beat the shit out of people. You can't really believe that. But if they had like, I don't know, like I really like the whole roadie thing because you could see that your friend who is helping you on the road is going to help you win matches. I just feel like random gimmick in a random time, like I felt like
just didn't fit.
Yeah, and I don't know like if they were showing more of him on Superstars or that show Metal or whatever they had at the time, so maybe they were doing more with him on that. But for me, like you said, it just kind of falls flat in this era. You have people flipping each other off, and then you have Jeff Jarrett coming out and singing with Jennifer Flowers. I mean, very strange. But yeah, and then also even his pairing with Steve Blackman, I mean, that was a strange pairing as well because, Jarrett hitting him with a guitar constantly and interfering. You just wonder why. There wasn't really an explanation as to why Jarrett didn't like Steve Blackman. Again, maybe it was made on Superstars, but on Raw, you just see the two of them going back and forth.
Yeah, it did seem like they meshed as good, even though they did have an issue, which would be logical. Just a unique pairing, but hey, listen, if anybody can make it work, it would be both Blackman and Jarrett. Yeah. But I'm with you. That is just something that stood out automatically. I'm thinking, here we are, we're getting ready to introduce a guy that's, got a lot of sexual overtones later on, and so many things. And this country music gimmick's better suited for the 80s or early 90s kind of WWF, and just not during the late 90s.
Or, he could have come back and like he could have been like attention seeking in a sense of like, I was famous years ago and then everyone just forgot about me and I'm back to show everyone like what I really can do. And like, you all know he's full of shit and he can't really sing or do any of that shit. But I mean, maybe he could just be like a crazy sort of like what's that called, a has-been who just thinks he does, I don't know. They could have done something with it. Didn't make
where
sense.
He's washed up.
Exactly. Where like maybe he's like he comes out and like he's not like, I don't know. It was a strange placing for Jarrett, but we'll move on to other segments in the show. Jim Ross interviews Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he asked Stone Cold if he's surprised that Mr. McMahon accepted his offer. And Stone Cold's not surprised because he warned Vince that he'd beat him up, punch his teeth out. We then get a segment where Briscoe and Patterson are giving Mr. McMahon advice on how to defend himself from the Stone Cold Stunner. Still some just fun little segments here to kind of get you prepared for the main event. We then have former Nation of Domination leader Faaroq come out to the ring, and he has his ribs taped up based on the attack from The Rock and the Nation members last week on Raw. And Faaroq comes out with a mic and he says, Rocky, I know you and the entire world see me. You cracked a rib, but it takes a lot more than that to kick my ass. He goes, I gave you all a chance of a lifetime, and I'm going to give you a chance now to kick my ass again like you tried last week. The Nation walk out, and The Rock says, The Rock has a very big hand, and that means I'll lay the smackdown on you whenever I please. The Rock wants you to realize that The Rock has warned you to get ready for your final thrill. And then Steve Blackman and Ken Shamrock come out on the ramp, and they salute Faaroq, and all the men fight. Referees pull it apart. It's a six-man brawl. The Nation against Faaroq, Shamrock, and Blackman. It's strange for Blackman because he's involved in two storylines right now with Jeff Jarrett and the Nation. But what did you think of Blackman and Shamrock helping out Faaroq? And do you think they are a worthy team against the Nation?
Oh, I definitely think they're worthy just because they're legitimate. Not saying Farouk's not. For Ron Simmons, one of the toughest guys ever. There's a lot of tough guys with the Godfather, Mark Henry, and The Rock himself. This is definitely vintage early Rock once he transitioned from the Rocky Maivia, the kind of the blue chipper gimmick, being second, third generation, actually, superstar. But one could easily foresee The Rock was going to be great. I mean, what a natural on the microphone, the promo abilities and his in-ring skills. I mean, we all witnessed. But I did not have a problem with the tandem of Blackman and Shamrock. I thought it was cool that they aligned themselves, or it was the big shock that Faaroq says, oh, yeah, come out, boys. You think you got me. The Nation of Domination thought they would one-up Faaroq, but in all reality, Faaroq had one-up them. So I kind of like this.
Yeah, it was good to see Faaroq have backup finally. I mean, for weeks he's been attacked by these guys. But a question for you: did you think that the Nation could go on with The Rock as leader, or did you feel like it would end after Faaroq left?
They could have went on longer with The Rock, but I think once Faaroq did leave, I've heard many people say, and it's easy to say it's true now and pretty apparent that the Nation was kind of there just to help establish The Rock. I mean, they were as much deserve the credit for helping get him over, and Faaroq himself, because he was the veteran. You put your younger guy with a veteran like Ron Simmons, and I mean, he's going to get over because he's got the heat. He's got the fans not liking him because he's this brash, cocky, arrogant jock who's turned wrestler, but also has the wrestling heritage. So he's got all the credentials, like aforementioned, like I stated before. So I could see it going on, which they did a little bit, but it was, I think, timing, and they knew The Rock was going to be one of their big stars. Sometimes timing and the stars align, just like with Austin, and it was the same with a lot of these wrestlers, including The Rock, the great one. That's why he's such a box office attraction now in Hollywood, because he has to think that tremendous wrestling career that he had. I mean, he was the epitome of a superstar.
Yeah. Well, when you think of WWE, it's hard not to think of someone like The Rock. And he wasn't even in for that long. He started in 96 and he left in like what, 03? So
Yeah,
not
no,
too
you're
long.
right.
But yeah, so this is a great group getting ready to fight the Nation. So now it's fair game. We then have Terry Funk come out to the ring, and Funk says, I have a new partner. Cactus Jack walled out here and proclaimed that he was quitting because the fans were chanting Austin. Terry says, I'm not a quitter. I'm going to put Funk in everyone's faces. And Terry says, my partner is hardcore, and McMahon never gave him a chance, but I did. And he introduces us to Scorpio, who fans of WWE know as Flash Funk. And if you're a fan of ECW, you would know as Too Cold Scorpio. So we have Terry Funk and Scorpio taking on the Quebecers. And Pierre nails a top rope belly to belly suplex to Scorpio. The Quebecers miss their finisher, and Scorpio ends up nailing a 450 splash and gets a 3 count. What did you think of this pairing of Terry Funk and Scorpio?
I didn't mind the pairing, and I say this with all due respect to both teams because I like the Quebecers. I didn't have an interest in this match.
Yeah.
I just it's the way, excuse me, a lot of them were going.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between that match with DX and Los Boricuas and the DOA. There was not a lot invested. I love Terry Funk, man. I'm a big territory wrestling fan, so I got an appreciation for the man. And of course, Too Cold Scorpio, Flash Funk, or whatever they were calling him, as you just said. But the match never intrigued me. I was glad it didn't last more than it had to. And the 450 splash and we go home. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, they didn't really. Something that I feel like they missed out on during this time was they didn't really explain things well unless you were able, like, Terry Funk and Scorpio were part of ECW, but I feel like if you knew the history, you would kind of respect them a bit more as a team. But they were kind of just thrown together, and there wasn't really as much of an explanation other than Terry Funk just liked them. So, well, we're at the war zone now. Time to go to bed, kids. And Jerry the King Lawler comes out to join Jim Ross on commentary. And then we have Luna Vachon coming out, and Luna calls out Sable. And we have Goldust coming out dressed as Sable with Sable's music. And Goldust says, you want some of Sable? You got it. And then Luna attacks Goldust and strips Goldust until Sable runs out and attacks. However, Luna is able to tear some of Sable's blouse. So, of course, get the fans piped up to see Sable. But what did you think of Goldust dressing up as Sable and the continuing antics of Luna and Goldust to get under Sable's skin?
I thought it was silly. And I'm a big proponent of both Luna Vachon, Goldust, and Sable. Yeah. It's just it's the silliness of this time period too. I mean, we've got Austin McMahon, we've got DX, and some of the silly antics. They're the ha-ha moments, as they call them. I don't particularly care. I love Luna Vachon. You talk about somebody who lived the gimmick. That was her. And it was fun for what it was. And I've got a lot of respect for Dustin Rhodes, who was Goldust. But just like I said before with the match, even this segment, it achieved, I guess, what it needed to, but it still didn't resonate with, we just got to have it on the show. But I get it. I'm going to contradict myself in the same statement because Sable and Luna did have a issue going on, so they had to settle it, or at least build to it. They didn't actually settle it. So not much to really unpack there. I mean, it was kind of the late hour kind of funny spot to me.
Way to get Sable out too, to friggin' see her, because everyone was obsessed with Sable at the time. Well,
you could see why, though.
Yeah. Oh, of course. I mean, but can I say though, man, holy cannoli, her boobs could take out a freaking country. Those things are huge. Like, holy shit. Like, there comes a point where it's like you say to her, I can't breathe. Anyways, we now have a tag match, the NWA Tag Team Champions, the new Midnight Express with Jim Cornette and Dan the Beast Severn, taking on Steve Blackman and Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn go face to face. However, Severn is told to leave ringside, and you know that those two have UFC history. Shamrock clotheslines Bodacious Bart, and then Bob nails a drop kick. Bob botches a Hurricane Rana on Steve Blackman. However, he's able to attack him in the corner. And And then Shamrock nails a power slam. And then Blackman and Ken Shamrock attack. Ken Shamrock nails a belly to belly. And pretty much shit goes off the rails, and the ref calls for a double disqualification. Really nothing much there, but what did you think of the new Midnight Express?
First of all, with all due respect, Bob Holly and Bart Gunn are both tough guys in their own right, but this new Midnight Express experiment did nothing for me, especially comparing it to the great success Cornette had. Speaking of Jim Cornette, with whether it was Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, or Dennis Condrey back in the territory days in the NWA. Steve Blackman, Ken Shamrock, we just talked about it. They made a great team. I thought the match was okay. To me, you've got a lot of legitimate strikers and tough people involved. But once again, I think some of these become filler, unfortunately, even with recognizable names. And the one thing that stood out more than the match was when Ross had the line. You could tell it was the Monday Night Wars. I'm paraphrasing this, so you can help me out with it. But going back to when they were promoting Vince McMahon versus Stone Cold Steve Austin for the title, they were saying that we don't have old guys that would have the title because, Vince was not old, but he wasn't young either. And that was a shot at the Hogans and the different people that have the belts over on the other channel. So I thought that was very cleverly done by JR on that point. So that to me impressed me more than the match, not taking anything away from it, but sometimes it's even the lines that he or Jerry the King Lawler used on commentary.
Yeah, I mean, those definitely that was. I think that was part of what was fun about the Attitude Era was you feel like you were watching it with your friends. That's something that Jerry the King Lawler said on his Broken Skulls series with Stone Cold. He basically just said that like when him and Jim Ross were doing it, they were just more. He was more of the friend that's going to watch and say crazy stuff, and Jim was more of the guy that's going to be more business oriented, which obviously you could see. But it felt like a big party when the two of them were out there watching it together. It felt like you were watching it with your friends, which is what wrestling is all about. But
exactly, and they're one of the greatest tag teams as far as broadcasting and announcing or commentary, however you want to slice it. Talking about the King and JR.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me as a viewer, I like when they get excited and draw you in. Like Mauro Ranallo is one of my favorites. Even now, like Pat McAfee, I really like a lot of when they approach it as a fan because you can connect with them because, Michael Cole, I love Michael Cole. It's great to hear him, but like, he's only fun when he does crazy shit too. Other than that, he's boring. So you have to have that sort of entertainment aspect on.
Yeah, both of them are special, and definitely respect the years that Michael Cole's been involved in doing commentary WWE. But I get it. There's a certain passion like JR had back during this time. Not saying he doesn't now, but it was just a different version of Jim Ross and what the King possessed that you can hear, like what you were saying with Pat McAfee and Mauro Ranallo. I just concur. They are all special in their own ways.
Yes, sir. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about a lot more. The Undertaker. We're going to be talking about the main event, Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. And welcome back to the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast, the Attitude Years, episode 21, Raw Is War, April 13th, 1998. I forgot where I was for a minute. I'm Ant, and of course, I got Tyler here with me. And before we continue recapping, I want to just give you a quick guide to where you could check us out. We are the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast, covering everything WWE, AEW, and much more. We have our Attitude Years series, which you're checking out now, but we also have series coming up, Ladies of the Ring Remixed, where we will be covering different females that have left their mark on WWE and professional wrestling as a whole. We have our Raw, SmackDown, and pay-per-view recaps. We have our Broken Skull Sessions recap, our newest episode dropping August 30th. Chris Jericho, great interview there, and we got a lot of cool stuff. So to find us, you could check us out on YouTube. Just search the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast. Give us a like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay notified when new content is published. And you can also find us streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Anchor, and wherever you listen to your podcast. And Tyler, you have some information too for our listeners. Tell us where they could hear your podcast and check out your website.
Yes, they can go like and follow, subscribe, and watch and listen to the Rewind Wrestling Radio podcast. We're on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, a lot of the similar platforms as your show, and also on YouTube. So there'll be archived episodes along with the newest and latest ones. So go check it out. We have a ladies that are part of our podcast that just had a ladies night episode breaking down their SummerSlam review and just talking some different things. So it's neat to hear their exciting perspective. And also another podcast, Standing Strong with Waylon Myers. It's non-wrestling, but it's all about positivity, and it's one that's about encouragement. So go check that one out. It's also available on all the social media sites and WrestleBuddy.com. I got to plug them. I'm very honored to be writing for them about wrestling, a shared passion we all have. So thank you for letting me plug them, my man.
Of course. And we'll have these links in the description too, so you could just click on them and check out the different stuff. But yeah, there's so many great content out there, but especially the Rewind Wrestling Radio podcast and WrestlingBuddy.com, great sources of freaking all of your wrestling needs. And Tyler, what was the other podcast that's about the positivity and encouragement?
That would be Standing Strong with Waylon Myers. He is the host, and much like what I'm doing now, I'm co-hosting it. He asked me to join that one. So yeah, I love wrestling, but it's kind of nice to change out the dialogue. So this one's just about, we have interviews with actors, everyday people, just kind of trying to overcome the obstacles of life and really hear some good advice on how to do better mentally and everything. So if you're going through mental health issues or just self-esteem, this is a great podcast for you.
Well, I'm definitely listening to that because self-esteem, all of that stuff, I'm in there for that because I got some mental health things I need to work on. And no, I definitely will listen to that.
Hey, we all do. So that's what's helpful about it.
Yeah, man. And listen, if there are a lot of people who don't like talk about their mental health, but we here at Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast think that's important too. So check out that podcast because you might be able to, feel better about yourself or learn some tools to make you improve on the life that you want. So cool. All right. Well, now that you know where to find us, we find Vince McMahon backstage, and he's talking and he says, I got butterflies in my stomach. He says, I proved I'm not afraid of the United States government. I'm not afraid of WCW or Ted Turner. And I'm sure as hell not afraid of Stone Cold Steve Austin. So what I like about this is they're not making Vince look like a coward. They are in a way, but he's trying to prove to himself that he's not a coward. So he's going to talk his shit. He's going to do all that stuff, but we'll have to find out later on what happens if he sticks to his word. Well, the Headbangers come out and the Undertaker actually comes out and takes them out. He nails a double choke slam, and then Kane and Paul Bearer come out on the ramp, and Paul Bearer says, well, you want your little brother to fight you. So you can't wait until Unforgiven in your house. You want to fight your own flesh and blood. He goes, well, you're going to do it on my terms. Next week on Raw, you will face your brother. However, you will meet us in the cemetery. You're worried about what your dead mommy and daddy think? Well, you can fight on their graves. And then Kane sets off the ring post with fire. Now, just for dramatic effect reasons, when I remember seeing Kane in like 2000, 2002,
yeah,
that bomb, like that explosion when he sets off the ring is loud. Like it's not like it's freaking scary. So boom, and you're just like,
oh, it is. He was at SummerSlam, so he did it,
and it was loud, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah, and you're even some space away from it, some distance, and it still gets you. It's like, this is incredible to actually visualize him doing the whole pose and then calling it down, and then they do the whole fire, the pyro deal.
Love that crap. And I also like to the intricates. You'll start to see him start to do this as he goes on. Kane talks a lot about how like he used his dog as a model to sort of like replicate like the little head turn and all the little intricate details that Kane does. But what do you think of the two of them fighting on their parents' grave sites? That's a little depressing, Adam's family-esque.
Yeah, talk about trying to follow in like a Horry storyline or something, the horror, I should say. And then with Paul Bear, I mean, he just makes everything so great.
Yeah.
Just with his voice, this was a different version of Paul Bear. It wasn't the same kind of ghoulish Bear, but you still saw remnants of it. I'm such a fan of his, and I can't stress enough. Like I said before, I'll just state it again. He was so important to the success of this whole angle between Undertaker and Kane, and it just made it unique. It made it feel different. It stood out. Whether you would ever think you'd see anything like this in wrestling before, that's what was so cool about the Attitude Era.
Yeah, you get a lot of firsts. You get a lot of things that, like, what's cool too is something that I think, I don't know who it was that didn't like this, but when they were screaming, like, it's got to be Kane, it's got to be Kane, you sort of were able to put two and two together. But I think that the way they introduced him was really cool. And I was young at the time, so I was always interested in what does he look like under the mask? What's there? What's there? Um, and just having Paul Bearer, like you said, he was so important to the storyline, important to both characters' careers in general.
It was mysterious. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was the essence. That's what made it work. It was not knowing who this guy was under the mask. They talked about him being burnt, so it made sense. He had to cover himself, but he was just this incredible physical specimen. You tell by the arms and stuff, and that's what made him imposing, just like Undertaker. It made it
yeah,
very believable that he was a relative, that he was a sibling of the Undertaker, and there was all that. Hey, the fans are trying to guess and estimate, when are we going to see Kane, to your observation there. And we finally do. And it just keeps building. It keeps getting established and keeps getting better and better each and every week.
yeah. Well, and the thing too is, and then we'll move on. The thing with the Undertaker is, like, when he first started out, he was kind of like the guy to vanquish the monsters, is what they said about him. He was taking on Kamala, Giant Gonzalez, King Kong Bundy, Yokozuna, Kama Mustafa, all these big Diesel, these big guys, right? And then this is the first sort of storyline where you're starting to see a different side of the Undertaker. You're starting to see that, like, he's human, he has parents. Um, his brother was burnt in a fire, and you start to see, even when he's at the grave sites before WrestleMania, talking to the parents about why he has to fight Kane. You start to see a different side of Taker. So I think that was so good about the Attitude Era, was you got to see different people, more 3D-esque rather than just sort of singular. But
Yeah,
anyway,
integral facts. Yeah,
yeah,
and we'll move on, but just very fascinating, compelling elements to the whole Undertaker Kane saga that we enjoyed, and I know we'll move forward. But that's all I was going to insert to it.
I do have a question for you before we move forward, if you don't mind me
Okay.
asking. How old
No.
were you during this time?
Okay, I was born at the last of '86, so I've got to get my math correct here. So I would have been maybe 11, going on
Okay.
12, because it would have been '98. So I think that would be
So
correct.
by that point, you're a bit older, like you're not a teenager yet. Did you, like, for me, I bought into this because I was little. Like, I really thought they had superpowers. Like, my ass was like, oh my God, he's setting the ring on fire. You probably knew they didn't have superpowers, but was it still as engaging to you, who might have been a little bit older, or did you feel like, it was gimmicky?
It was still engaging, even though I would agree it was gimmicky. It still kept my focus, and I got lost in the story. I mean, that's when you know it's good, when you can visualize yourself going, okay, it's out there, but I could see it. And
Yeah.
I think it's a testament to both the Undertaker and Kane and to Paul Bearer and the creative for WWF that they could pull this off, because they're about the only ones that I think fans would buy it.
Yeah.
So that was a major part of it, or concerning it, I should say, in other words.
Yep. Well, speaking of a concern or something like that, we got Val Venus, another promo. And I mean, I was also surprised with how quick this was after WrestleMania that he comes out and does this whole thing. But he does this promo and he's basically receiving love from ladies in a locker room, and he talks about lusting in space, and it's just him with sexual innuendos. Did you feel like you were going to be able to take Venus seriously based on these promos, or like were you excited? Like, how did you feel of Val Venus?
I tried to look at it a different way. I don't know that anybody would take that gimmick that seriously, but it was part of the comedic elements, I guess you would allude to, with Val Venus. But there was a lot of guys wanting to be him. I mean, let's face it, he was in the locker room with all these attractive ladies. Am I going to stand here and hold judgment and say, oh, I know it was controversial, but it was the attitude era, and say I didn't want to be Val Venus? Come on. I mean, I did, but did I take it literally like he was going to be a threat? No. Now he was a great athlete and a good wrestler.
Yeah.
And this, for what it was, I mean, fitting though. I couldn't imagine anybody else pulling it off better than him. So, I mean, it was just a segment, a way to introduce him. So I didn't really have a problem with it, but it's not like he's going to be like Stone Cold or The Rock or one of the major main event stars, with respect to him. But for his job, he did it well.
Hello, ladies.
I was hoping you would say that. Please say that. And can you do Lust in Space too? Can you do that?
How do you lust in space? Hello, ladies. He does this like very like deep, like
Yeah.
I
He
can't.
does a very deep voice. Oh yes.
I know he was married, or I'm not sorry, he wasn't, but I know that Edge was married to his sister for quite some time, and then they got divorced, and then he did his thing with Lita. So
Sure.
Generation X come out after this, and Owen Hart follows, and Owen says, "One of you guys is gonna get your ass kicked tonight." Then Triple H says, "Well, I had everybody DX write a 500-word essay on who wants to kick Owen Hart's ass so badly." And he makes a joke, which I found pretty funny. He says, "The Road Dogg wrote his essay on tiny papers called zigzags," which, if you are a smoker, you know that those are rolling papers. Um, and then he goes, "The winner by far had to be Billy Gunn's essay." And so you have WWF Tag Team Champion Billy Gunn with DX taking on Owen Hart, and Legion of Doom 2000 with Sonny come out, and they just sort of watch at ringside. The match starts with Owen kneeling across body. China gets on the apron, but Legion of Doom walk towards her. Owen Hart's nails a missile drop kick, and then Billy Gunn nails a Fameasser. And then Billy goes for a power slam, but Owen Hart is able to actually roll him up and get a 3 count. And surprisingly, that was it for that segment. What did you think of Owen Hart finally outsmarting DX?
I thought it was clever because DX thought they had him right where they needed him, but they didn't expect LOD 2000 to come out with Sonny. And this was definitely a different interpretation of the Road Warriors here.
Yeah.
But it made sense because, DX did have the issue with LOD, but I don't think they expected it, at least in storyline. And I think Triple H and X-Pac were comical on commentary. Seeing JR get aggravated with them made it for me. And then going back to the 500-word essay was very intelligently done about who was going to destroy Owen. And it just goes to show you, DX, to their credits, very educated. I mean, that's my, a highlight for me. And I thought the match was good. Billy Gunn's powerful, athletic. Owen's amazing. Gosh, do I miss him. I mean, it's so sad. And like Brian Christopher, sad what happened to him, Jerry Lawler's son.
Yeah.
You talked about him. But that's what I'm glad with having this kind of library and the WWE Network and Peacock is people have avenues to appreciate and go back and watch these wrestlers that have passed and people are at least involved in the business. And it just really makes me sad. I get teary-eyed if I'm not careful. There's still that emotion, that raw emotion, pardon the pun, that comes out. So I thought this match was pretty good, and I like the finish where he surprised him, cradled Billy Gunn, and got the win, and got out the ring before DX could chase him down.
Yeah, Owen was like, for his age, so far ahead of his time. Like you tend, the thing about these wrestlers is you sort of like, they always stay in our mind like that age that they were, that they passed. So like I always think when I think of Owen Hart, like what he could be doing right now, in the sense of that, like, he would probably be a little bit younger than Brett, so he might not be a full-time wrestler, but he could be like a Christian Cage. Like, he could be, I always wonder like what he would be doing now. And
I
when
think
you
he
think
could
of,
be an agent or a coach even.
yeah. And I tend to always, and this is stories for another topic, but like when I was watching the Dark Side of the Ring with Owen Hart, um, I know his wife said that like he was looking to leave the business and he wanted to be a fireman and all that stuff. But I think it's hard for me to believe based on the talent that he had, and just how much like work ethic he had for the business and how much he put into it, that he would randomly just want to not do it anymore. I think, I don't know. I feel like a lot at the time, Martha, I think, and anybody would, I think she blamed the business for what happened to Owen, which I get.
Yeah, she was bitter.
And the thing that sort of is funny to me now is like seeing her, in AEW. I'm like, come on, like I don't understand. I get like,
It's hard seeing her with another company, knowing how much Owen meant to the WWF, because he even stayed after Brett left after that whole ordeal. Yeah, go ahead.
And the cool thing about after Brett left too is like he was still his own, even though he was Brett's brother, he still had his own storylines that were compelling enough. Like he joins the Nation, he breaks Dan Severn's neck. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens, and he's still the Blue Blazer. Like there's all. I mean, granted, that's what ended his life, but like
he was doing so much.
Yeah, and like you don't think about how young he was, like 94, winning the King of the Ring. Like it's crazy because if you think, we're in April '98, a year and a month, he's going to be gone. So, it's weird to think, like, I wonder where his headspace was at. Like, I wonder what he was thinking. Where did he see himself in 3 years in 01 or like in 2004? Like, where was Owen Hart going to go? And we will never know, unfortunately. But
nobody could have expected it. And I mean, Owen Hart he meant so much to everybody. And with all due respect to Martha, I don't buy that or agree with personally that he was going to be done. Somebody who grows up and with Stu Hart as your father, who's trained so many in that Hart dungeon, and then had all those, legendary figures that came out there as far as the wrestlers, and then Bret the Hitman Hart, Davey Boy, the British Bulldog, and Jim the Anvil Neidhart. I just don't foresee or could even fathom Owen Hart not wrestling. Even especially if he was able to still fulfill his life and had not passed, or doing something like I mentioned, maybe even being a producer or an agent, however you say it, or a coach in NXT. I could see Triple H saying, "Hey, Owen, you want to do this position?" And I could probably see Owen being tempted at least and being interested.
And I think this is another thing about Owen. I don't know why I'm like so focused on this situation. Everyone grieves differently, but I also thought it was a little weird that like after he passed, that Martha and the children went up to where he was, because I just feel like that. Why? Like me, like I feel like maybe you want to get some kind of closure, but like I think that might be like that's hurting the children. I think to like, this is where my father died. I'm sitting right here. I don't know. I heard some things in there that I was just kind of like, I don't know Owen personally, but his, like you said, his family, just how much the friends he had in the business. I bet there was probably a moment where he probably said, like, I don't know if I want to do this forever. Maybe he was thinking of other career options, but I don't think when he passed, he was ready to leave. Like, I don't think he wanted to leave WWE at the time. I think he was still, I'd say maybe like in 02, 01, he might be like, what, I'm done. But I think he was still planning on doing some stuff.
I think he had a lot of longevity left. I think he had a lot to offer the company, any wrestling promotion, but he had a lot of years that he would have contributed and been a star like he always been. And sure, he was a family man. He did love his family. Nobody's questioning that. I could see where he may take some dates off, but Owen had that old school mentality from his dad and seeing his brothers, especially Brett. He was going to work that grueling schedule that Vince had you do. And I mean, he was going to show up, and he was one of the best workers and wrestlers all around. There was no doubt about it. He
Yeah.
had to live in that shadow with Bret. That's what made that storyline, and that's for another show. But that would be a good one to talk about, the whole Bret Hart Owen Hart rivalry. But yeah, we'll move on. But that was
Yeah,
but
that was
hey,
really good.
we need to dedicate some time though in honor of Owen. So I'm
Yeah.
glad we kind of stayed with it. Actually,
Well, no, because the thing,
so
like, for me growing up, again, like I grew up in a great time because I grew up in the ruthless aggression period. Like, so I grew up in a time where I knew who he was. But watching back and seeing like his match with Brett is probably like at WrestleMania is probably one of my favorite matches. And it wasn't Brett that did the work; it was Owen that I thought did the work that I enjoyed. The SummerSlam '94, I mean, it was a lot. It was a cage match. So a lot of them is it climbing and
mhm.
all that shit. But I mean, just his matches with freaking X-Pac coming up soon. I mean, Owen's doing some pretty good shit, and for a while he has. And as a young kid, you don't get to really appreciate or understand that it's their bodies that they're putting on the line. You see two guys fighting, you're not really thinking of it, or two girls, whatever. Um, but yeah,
No,
so Owen
you're
Hart,
correct. But what I was going to say, it's the chemistry. I mean,
yeah,
Austin Rock had it, Brett and Austin had it, and Owen and Brett and Owen and X-Pac. I
yeah.
mean, what you were stating, and to me, you brought up another good fact that when we're watching it as kids, as just fans on TV, we don't fully respect what they're having to put their bodies through. It's a very grueling process.
I remember the first time I learned because 2000, I was 7. And I remember I was going to a live show and they had Sunday Night Heat that night, and X-Pac was supposed to be fighting. And I was like, well, that's going to be weird. Like, I'm not going to see X-Pac tonight. Okay. And I went to the show and X-Pac was on the card. I was like, oh, they tape it. Um, so, when you're little, you don't realize, that they have the loop. They're working the 2 days and then they're working the 3 or 4 days during the week or the weekend. Like, so they're putting their body through a lot. Um, but
Oh,
yeah,
they
we'll
are.
move on. So we're at our main event. Vince McMahon comes down with Commissioner Slaughter, Gerald Briscoe, Pat Patterson, and Shane, his son. And then WWF champion Stone Cold Steve Austin walks down as well. And there's a lot of jaw jocking to start. Like they're not really, Vince is just sort of talking, walking around and just looking at Austin. He ends up holding the bell at one point. And then he goes over and he slaps Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then Austin gets pissed. And then Vince grabs the mic and he says, Stone Cold, you told me you could beat me with one arm tied behind your back. Let's see if you're a man of your word. And then he basically has Stone Cold Steve Austin get his arm tied behind his back. And then Vince McMahon, I'm sorry, Gerald Briscoe gives Vince a mouthpiece to get him ready. But then Dude Love comes out, and we haven't seen Dude Love since the summer of 1997. Although if to him it feels like it's the summer of '67. And
That's what I
dude,
was about to say. Yeah.
yeah, great minds think alike. So dude comes out and dude says, the dude doesn't feel a whole lot of love out here tonight in where were they, Pennsylvania, and he goes, "We are tight, Steve-O, but Vince McMahon writes a check that lets the dude live his life that the dude wants to live." He goes, "Vince, you are my McMahon man." And then he goes, when you look at Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then all of a sudden, Vince McMahon shoves Dude Love to the ground. And then Dude gets pissed and he goes, Vince, you just made the world's biggest mistake. And he being Dude Love, goes to put the mandible claw on Vince McMahon, but he turns around and he applies it to Stone Cold Steve Austin. And, it looks like he's putting those freaking hands down to those fingers down his throat. They keep beating up Austin. And eventually Dude Love challenges Austin. Austin fights back, and it just ends in chaos. So you don't get to see Stone Cold and Vince go at it, but you do get to see the third face of Foley, Dude Love, come out. So what did you think of Dude Love as a character? And now this is another situation where it's kind of like, for me, and then I'll get your point of view. I always wondered why they used this Dude Love, like this face of Foley, to go against Austin, because he sort of wasn't really as popular as Cactus Jack or Mankind. But I get this is sort of what Mick Foley as a child wanted to be like as a wrestler. So it would make sense that he would pick this face to follow his dream and go for the WWE title. But I wish they would have explained that more instead of learning years later that, this is who he wishes he could have been, like a Shawn Michaels, like a sexy character type guy. So yeah. So what are your thoughts on Dude Love interfering and ruining the match?
I thought it was great because everybody just thought we were going to get Vince and Stone Cold and they were going to save it for pay-per-view. And I think they wanted to have Mick Foley do this exact gimmick because it showed more of his personality in a different light. And we just saw previously on that episode of Raw where Cactus Jack retired. What Terry Funk was saying, he doesn't care what the fans think. Maybe, Foley does. And this just gives us a great rivalry. But instead of getting the typical Cactus Jack or Mankind match against Austin, we get Dude Love versus Austin. And I'll say this just real briefly about McMahon, going back to him. All the demeanor, you talk about somebody that can command the ring. That is the then chairman, Vince McMahon. And especially with his lackeys and Patterson, Slaughter, Briscoe, and then having Shane come out. I love how they continued where Shane was trying to advise him, Dad, please don't do this. But Vince was dead set on it because he would feel like a coward if he didn't accept this challenge. And going back to that interview with talking about WCW and not afraid of the government, that really resonates now with all the allegations. But back then, that's what I was thinking. This is kind of weird because he's going through this current situation, but he's bringing up the truth that he did overcome the steroid trial and so many things. But unfortunately, the big question, will he be able to overcome this current ordeal? But getting back to the main event, I thought it was brilliantly done because of all involved. And I didn't mind the way they closed the show was how you need to do it, just like you open it with chaos and the unexpectancy, the spontaneity, and make the show grittier. I think the thing is everything's overproduced, which I get. It's a new generation.
Yeah.
But this is one of the things that kept the Attitude Era and even WCW Nitro so special with the Monday Night Wars. Everything was good production, but not so slick.
Yeah, what I liked about it was more of like it felt more real because you're not going to really have a camera crew backstage unless you plan it, right? So when they're having like the crazy camera cuts and like it's not all tight and like maybe the camera is shaky, like that's perfect because that's really going to happen. If you go see a fight, you're not going to be unless it's produced, it's not gonna look great. So I do like that greatness of it. And what's cool about this time is, before April, you have like January, obviously February, March, those times they were still in transition of Attitude, right? So like you're still seeing some proponents of, 96, 97, but I'd say like right now and after Unforgiven, that's when you're in full Attitude Era where things aren't so PG and things are going to get more intense. But I did like how
they're let it go.
Yeah, I do like this idea of a new face fighting Stone Cold again. As a kid, I personally would have rather have seen like a Cactus Jack versus Stone Cold, but as an adult, it would be hard to boo Cactus Jack, right? Because he gives so much to just his body. So I think when you have a character like Dude Love, it's easy to hate.
You said it. He sacrifices his body, going back to those famous Hell in a Cell matches with Taker. I mean, that fall through the table, and then I think either before or after he goes through the cage, that was some brutal and scary stuff. I mean, that was some real deal. You're hoping he's not severely injured or even half dead. I mean, when JR said that call there, he said that was for real. He thought maybe broken it himself in half because he did in a way. So going to your point, you appreciate this talent, these wrestlers. Yeah. They were entertaining us. That's what made it believable because they were working stiffer or having more leeway due to, not having networks and sponsorship restrict them, because that was the thing that hurt WCW. They were under Turner, where Vince was running the company. You didn't have television telling him what to do. He was able to kind of micromanage that. And that's what was the strength. I mean, you think about it, and it's something as a fan growing up as a child, I didn't fully recognize that at first.
Oh, totally. Totally not. But something I do want you to recognize, what would you say is the moment of the night for you? Like, what's something that you would tell fans to go back and watch, or something that you yourself would go back and watch from this episode?
Well, this will sound redundant, but it's got to go to Vince and Stone Cold. I mean, I think the opening and the way Vince comes out during the show to interrupt the tag team match, the backstage segments, the interview with Austin, the way JR even goes and talks to him, Shane, Patterson, Briscoe, Slaughter, and the interviews with Vince. I mean, I think the whole interplay here is something fans and people who may have not grown up in this era or may just need to watch it again, or you're new to wrestling, go out of your way and check it out. This will definitely educate you in a hurry. And this is, to me, what promotions can learn from as far as storytelling. There was some great stuff. Kane and the Undertaker, don't forget about that. That would have to definitely be another highlight. And with all due respect to the other talent, those were the two. But even as good as Taker and Kane with Bear, I mean, it's got to go to Austin McMahon, because you didn't see McMahon get in the ring like we talked about off air. So that was special.
Man. I agree. I mean, and the reason why I agree with you too is because like just how like historical it is. Like, yeah, Undertaker and Kane is historical, but this is the first time that the Boss is fighting Stone Cold. And it became so polarized and popular that even MTV picked it up in September to do Celebrity Death Match with the two. So it just very was popular, and it was popping, and still is.
Yeah, you hit the big time when Celebrity Death Match has
oh
you
yeah, dude, that's freaking there. It's just, I just remember being a kid and just feeling like this was the beginning of Attitude Era, which is why I was so surprised that it sort of kicked everything off. I thought it was coming later down the line, but no, these two go at it right away.
I think the competition with Nitro and Raw really helped kickstart it, because I think they would have waited, but everybody was kind of doing some innovative things on both sides of the equation, and that's what propelled this whole shift. Catastrophic shift at that, with the creative and everything.
Yes, sir. I agree, my friend. Well, that will do it for this week's episode of Raw Is War. Join us next. I'm thinking our next episode will drop on Monday, August 8th. So with that, we will be covering Raw Is War from April 20th, 1998. They're going to be live in Long Island, New York, the home of Mick Foley. I'm excited to hear mixed thoughts on why he attacked Stone Cold Steve Austin and helped out Vince McMahon. I'm excited to see Undertaker and Kane meet at their parents' grave sites, and there's a lot more stuff coming. Tyler, thank you again for joining me. I'm excited to have you, and our listeners are excited to have you.
Thank you
too. And we will see y'all soon. We will see you on Monday with our next episode. Until then, stay safe. Keep it classy. Peace in the streets. Bye, y'all. Peace.